Hey, what's up, View City? I'm so glad that you guys are back here. And we are on week 2 of our Others First series, and it's going so well. But what I want to hear from you guys in the comment section is, what are your biggest pet peeves? Let me know, let us know in the comment section. We would love to connect with you. But for me, one of my biggest pet peeves is when I'm washing the dishes and my sleeves get wet. That is, it's weird. It feels uncomfortable. I don't like it. But you see, there's things that bug us, and then there's also things that, things that get us triggered, that get us fired up, things that we really can't stand. And that's what today's message is about. What makes you truly disgusted with what you see in the world? What is something that when you see it, it twists your stomach on the inside? Something that builds up a righteous anger on the inside of you. Something that when you see it, you just can't believe that this can be a reality for some people. And we're going to be looking into the story of David and Goliath. I'm sure you've heard of the reference somewhere. I'm sure you know of the story, but we're going to go through that story right now. And you can find that in 1 Samuel 17. And basically what happens is that the Philistines gathered their army to go and face the Israelites, who are God's people. And these Philistines, they had a giant on their team. I'm sure you've heard of him. His name was Goliath, and this guy was huge. And he would go out of the camp each day and hurl insults across to the Israelite people. He would taunt them. He would just defy them in every way. And what happened was, David, who had 3 brothers who were in the war, his father sent him to go and bring food to his brothers. And what happened was, he went to the camp with the food, and he saw this giant. He saw Goliath, and he heard him hurling those taunts and hurling those insults to God's people, the Israelites. And he just couldn't stand it. He was like, this can't happen. And I love that about David. He stood up against this, and he was like, no, I'm standing against this. And he was just a boy. But just to put things into context for you, on how big Goliath actually was, just to put some context there for you to see who David was really standing against. It says this in 1 Samuel 17, verse 4. It says, a champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. That's around about 3 meters tall. I have never met someone who's 3 meters tall. I probably wouldn't want to be against someone that's 3 meters tall, because that is absolutely huge. And then it says, verse 5, it says, he had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze, weighing about 5,000 shekels. Goliath's armor weighed about 58 kg. That is a lot of weight. I know you gym people there, I know you guys are probably like, it's all right, but that is a lot of armor to be carrying around, just to show some perspective on how huge and strong this guy was. And it says on his legs he wore bronze greaves and a bronze javelin that he slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. That spear head was about 6.9 kilograms, which is a lot. And his shield bearer went ahead of him. Just to give you some context onto who David was actually standing up against. And then we see that David kind of goes out and he's like, no, something has to happen. I'm going to stand up against this guy. And he goes to the king, who was Saul at the time. And this is what Saul says to David. He says this, you are not able to go up against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. I'm going to tell you right now, View City, that whenever you stand up against something that you know is not right, whenever you stand up against injustice, whatever you're standing up against, there's going to be people that tell you, no, it's too big for you. Nah, I don't think you can do it. It's been going on for too long. It's too powerful. It's been going on for so long that there's nothing that you could possibly do about it. You're too young. You're too insignificant. That's basically what Saul is telling David here. But I'm going to encourage us to adopt the fearless heart of David in this situation. He was like, I don't care what you say. I know with my God, I can go into this situation, I can gain victory. And the crazy thing about this story is that we'll read that, you can read there in 1 Samuel 17, that his brothers even went against David. They were like, why are you here? What are you doing here? They questioned why he was there. They didn't want they didn't want him to be there. They're like, what gives you the right to be here? What gives you the right to speak in this situation? And I'm telling you that in your life, as you step out against things, as you step out against injustices, even the close people to you sometimes, the people that know you the most, the people that have lived with you, maybe your friends at school, maybe your peers, maybe your own family, they'll be like, no, I know you. This is not something that you can do. I know what you've done before. You can't stand up against this thing. But I want you guys to adopt that heart of David and be like, no, I'm going to go against this. With God, I can gain victory over this. Just so you guys know how much opposition David faced in what he was doing. But I've got 3 points for us that are really going to help us in going out and stepping out against the things that we know are wrong in the world. And the first one of those points is to be courageous. Adopt that fearless heart of David. You will face opposition from people. That's a reality. I just want to let you know what you're getting into before you get into it. You will face opposition. You will face opposition from all angles. But when you stand up, when everyone is sitting down, you will face opposition. That's just the nature of it. I don't know that reference. What is it that the tallest tree gets the brunt of the wind or something like that? You know, when you stand up, you're gonna face opposition. When everyone, it seems like everyone is against you, you're gonna face opposition. But be courageous. Adopt that fearless heart that with God, something can change. I can make a difference in this situation. And you know that when you stand up, that'll encourage other people to stand up. When people see you stepping out, it'll encourage them to step out. You can really inspire people by being courageous. And my second point is use your own weapons. It says in 1 Samuel 17, verse 38, it says, "Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on this sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. 'I cannot go in these,' he said to Saul, because I'm not used to them." So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in his pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in hand, he approached the Philistine. I'm going to encourage you to use your own gifts. Use what God has put on the inside of you. Use the talents and use your personality that God has given you, because God has made you wonderfully and he has made you perfectly for the community that you're in, for the family that you're in, for the school that you're in, for even the time that you're in. He has made you perfectly, and you don't need to try and be like anyone else. You see, Saul was trying to give David his armor that wasn't familiar to him, but David said, no, I can't use these because they're not familiar to me. They're not mine. And he picked up what was familiar to him. He picked up what he was used to using. And that's what I'm encouraging us to do today. Use your own gifts. Use your own talents. Use your own personality, because with that, God can do so much. We can look at what we have and we can be like, it doesn't look like much. But I can tell you that in the hands of God, with God, that can do a whole lot. It can make a huge difference. It can make a huge change in the world, in your school, in your friend groups. So don't think what you have is insignificant, because when God is with you and when you put it in the hands of God, that small thing that you have, that however insignificant you feel, God can use whatever faith you have, whatever courage you have, whatever your personality is. He can use whatever gifts that you have to make a difference and to make a change. So use your own weapons. And point number 3, which is the last point, which is go out into the battlefield. As Christians today, we see a lot of things that are wrong in the world. We see a lot of things going on. You know, there's gender-based violence that's happening in South Africa, which is terrible. And there's racism happening, and it's still happening all over the world. There's so many things that are happening, even small scale in our schools. We know that there are people that are bullied, there are people that are picked on. and they're people that are marginalized. We know that. But us as Christians, we need to go out into the battlefield. The battlefield is where you see injustice, wherever you see something happening that you know is not right. It is where you see the opportunity to stand up for someone who can't stand up for themselves. That is where the battlefield is, and that's where you need to go. Take your courage there, take your weapons there, and go and fight with God to bring change and to make a difference. Wow. We're going to come into a story here when Jesus stood up for a woman who was caught in adultery. You can find this in John chapter 8. And basically what's going on here is that this woman was caught in the act of adultery. She was cheating on her husband. She was sleeping with someone that wasn't her spouse. And what you need to know about this time was if you were caught in adultery, that was punishable by death. Right? And it wasn't like a quick execution. This was stoning, and not that kind of stoning. They were going to throw rocks at her until she died. That was that kind of torturous and brutal death. And what happens is that the Pharisees, they dragged this woman out as they caught her. They dragged her out and threw her at the feet of Jesus. And they were trying to corner Jesus in what they asked. They went and asked Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery, and the law of Moses commands us to stone such a woman. Now what do you say?" And Jesus said something amazing. He says this, "Let anyone who is without sin throw the first stone at her." They all began to drop their stones until only one was left, Jesus. And then he goes on to ask her, "Woman, where are they now? Has no one condemned you?" "No, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." Wow, this is so encouraging about what Jesus did here. There was a crowd. These Pharisees were baying for blood. They wanted her dead. And Jesus stood up for this woman in this moment, this woman who is helpless in this situation. He stood up for her against all the opposition that was there. They were trying to trap him in a corner, and Jesus showed compassion, and he stood up for her. And I think that in this story, we can be at any given moment, we can be any of these three people. We can be like the Pharisee, we can be like the woman, and we can choose to be like Jesus. I think maybe we can be like the woman where we feel that we've made a mistake, or we have been caught in a sin that we're in. Or we can feel like the Pharisee maybe, where you know that you have brought someone down to make yourself feel better. You can be in that situation. Or I think, which is the kind of encouragement, which is where we're trying to get to, is we can be like Jesus in this situation. And we can stand for people. You know, where the world said death, Jesus said grace. He showed compassion. He showed grace to this woman, and he stood up for her. And I think that's what we need to be like today, View City. That's my challenge for us. Look at the world and look at what makes you sad. What makes you what rises a righteous anger in you in the world. And take a step towards that. Take a step in standing out against that. Be courageous. You are going to face opposition, but be courageous and use the gifting that God has given you. Use the weapons that God has given you to step out into the battlefield and make a change and make a difference. That is my encouragement for us